At 6 o'clock in the morning, over the marshlands north of Crimea, a formation of Ukrainian drones was flying so low that the ground seemed to skim beneath their wings. Ahead lay the Chanhar Bridge, a key link in the transport network connecting Crimea with Russian-controlled areas in southern Ukraine. But the greatest danger was not the bridge itself. It was the route leading to it. Mud, shallow salt water, and narrow strips of solid ground left the formation with almost no freedom to change course. To avoid long-range surveillance radar, the drones had to remain close to the surface. Yet the deeper they flew into the marsh, the more predictable their approach became. Every radar that switched on could expose the position of an air defense system. Every control signal sent through the air could also lead the enemy back to the people operating the mission. Even so, the Ukrainian formation continued moving forward, although the safest route on the map may also have been the very place where Russia had prepared its trap. What was waiting for those drones inside the narrow marsh corridor? And could Ukraine complete the mission before the hunt turned back toward the operators themselves? The Ukrainian drone formation moved toward the Chanhar area at an extremely low altitude, using the marshland itself as cover. Instead of climbing into open air, where Russian surveillance systems could detect them from a greater distance, the drones stayed close to the ground. Mist, shallow water, low vegetation, and the flat surface of the marsh reduced the range at which ground-based radar could see them clearly. This did not make the aircraft invisible. It simply shortened the time available for Russian forces to detect the formation, identify its direction, and prepare a response. The drones also moved in a loose formation rather than flying close together. This reduced the risk that one missile or one explosion could destroy several aircraft at the same time. More importantly, the formation allowed different drones to perform different tasks during the mission. The aircraft at the front faced the greatest danger. Their role was to enter the route first, observe the conditions ahead, and expose any sudden threat along the flight path. Other drones carried the heavy warheads intended for the bridge. A smaller group remained farther behind or moved wider than the main formation, watching areas where Russian defensive systems might be hidden. This was not simply a line of drones flying toward one target. It was a coordinated strike package in which each aircraft had a specific place and purpose. The mission depended on an airborne relay flying above the strike formation. The Ukrainian ground team was operating many kilometers from the target, beyond the normal reach of a direct radio link from a low ground antenna. The relay received commands from the operators and passed them forward to the drones moving toward Chanhar. This connection allowed the crews to correct direction, altitude, and approach, while the aircraft were already deep inside occupied territory. It gave Ukraine more control than a fully programmed flight route, especially in poor visibility or when conditions changed near the target. However, the relay also created a serious weakness. It had to keep transmitting to maintain the link. Any strong and continuous radio signal could attract Russian electronic warfare units searching for active control systems. The marsh created another problem. It looked wide and empty, but much of it was covered by soft ground, shallow water, and low obstacles. Only a limited number of paths offered a practical route toward the bridge. Flying low reduced exposure to distant radar, but it also made the direction of the formation easier to predict. Once the drones entered one of these narrow corridors, changing course became more difficult. The route that gave Ukraine its best protection from long-range detection was now carrying the formation toward an area Russia may already have prepared. As the Ukrainian formation continued south, the greatest danger was no longer the distance to the bridge. Russian air defense crews may already have identified the few practical routes across the marsh. From above, the terrain appeared wide and open. In reality, shallow water, soft ground, and scattered vegetation limited safe navigation. Only a small number of corridors allowed the drones to maintain a stable low altitude without making sudden turns or climbing into clear airspace. These natural limits made the approach easier to predict. Russian planners did not need to defend every part of the marsh. They only needed to study the routes that low-flying aircraft were most likely to use. The surrounding terrain could then guide the Ukrainian formation toward a prepared engagement area. According to the reported sequence, Russian forces positioned Tor-M2 short-range air defense systems on both sides of one narrow corridor. This created overlapping fields of fire across the same section of airspace. A drone moving away from one launcher could enter a better position for the system on the opposite side. The formation, therefore, had less freedom to turn, climb, or spread out once it moved deeper into the corridor. The deployment also allowed Russia to concentrate its defensive strength on one route where the enemy had fewer choices. The Tor-M2 is designed to engage drones, helicopters, low-flying aircraft, and cruise missiles at short range. Its radar, tracking equipment, and missiles are carried on the same vehicle, allowing the crew to detect and engage targets without a separate radar truck. The Tor-M2 systems were reportedly kept silent during the early approach. Their radars did not immediately search the sky, even though the Ukrainian drones were already moving toward the area. This likely protected the launchers from being discovered too early. A radar that is not transmitting is much harder to locate. Every transmission creates an electronic signature that surveillance equipment may detect and trace. By waiting until the drones entered engagement range, the Russian crews reduced the time their positions remained exposed. This also preserved surprise. If the Tor radars had activated too early, Ukrainian operators might have detected the threat and changed direction. Keeping the systems silent allowed the drones to move deeper into the corridor before the main defensive layer became visible. Russia was waiting for the target to lose room to escape. The first attack reportedly came from a shoulder-fired infrared missile aimed at the leading Ukrainian drone. Unlike radar-guided weapons, this missile follows the heat produced by the target. It can be carried by a small team and launched with little warning, making it dangerous against aircraft flying close to the ground. The purpose of the first shot may not have been limited to destroying the drone. A missile rising from the vegetation could force the aircraft to react immediately. Inside a narrow corridor, even a small change in altitude or direction could disturb the formation. If the leading aircraft climbed to escape the short-range missile, it would become easier for larger radar-guided systems to detect and track. The first launcher could therefore shape the target's movement rather than simply trying to score a direct hit. The marsh limited the available routes. The shoulder-fired missile disrupted the leading drone. The Tor-M2 systems remained hidden until the target entered a more favorable position. The Ukrainian formation was still moving toward the bridge, but the battle had changed. Every forced reaction could now support the next stage of the Russian ambush. The moment the leading drone left its low-altitude path, the full structure of the trap began to appear. The leading Ukrainian drone climbed sharply after the shoulder-fired missile rose from the marsh. That movement changed the battle. At low altitude, the aircraft had been difficult to track because it stayed close to the ground and below the clearest view of larger radar systems. Once it climbed, its outline became easier to see against the sky. The drone may have escaped the first threat, but it had also entered a better position for the Tor-M2 systems waiting on both sides of the corridor. From the Russian point of view, this was the moment the ambush had been designed to create. The target was now higher, more exposed, and still moving through a narrow section of airspace. The Tor crews could not remain silent much longer. If they delayed, the formation might pass beyond the best engagement point and continue toward the bridge. The two Tor M2 systems began searching and tracking the climbing drone. Their radars allowed the crews to guide missiles toward the target, but every transmission created an electronic signature. The launchers had moved from silent positions into active battle. This may have been exactly what Ukraine wanted. The leading drone could have been used as a decoy, with its operator accepting high risk to force the Russian systems to react. Its purpose was not only to survive or draw fire away from the formation. Its greater value was making the Tor crews activate the equipment that revealed where they were hiding. That is the central purpose of a decoy. It creates a response that exposes a more important target. In this case, the radar signal mattered more than the missile itself. Two Ukrainian drones had reportedly remained behind the main formation. They were not yet committed to the bridge. Instead, they kept their distance and waited for the Russian systems to become active. Once the Tor radars began transmitting, the supporting drones changed direction toward the flanks of the corridor. The active signals gave them the general locations of the launchers. The movement of the radar equipment then provided a clearer point for the final approach. Speed was essential. A Tor M2 remains dangerous while it tracks targets and guides missiles. However, it becomes vulnerable when it stays in one place, keeps its radar active, and focuses on threats ahead. The Ukrainian drones used that short window to descend toward the Russian positions from different directions. Both Tor M2 systems were reportedly struck within a short period. Their vehicles were not designed to survive direct hits from heavy attack drones carrying large warheads. Once damaged, the systems could no longer provide the same protection across the corridor. This did not remove Russia's wider air defense network around Crimea. Other radar stations, missile batteries, electronic warfare units, and defensive teams could still operate elsewhere in the region. The result was local and temporary rather than complete. Even so, the effect was important. The surviving Ukrainian drones now had a brief opening to continue toward the bridge without facing the two Tor systems that had controlled the route moments earlier. The engagement also showed how a drone's role can change during a single mission. One aircraft became a decoy. Two others became air defense hunters. The remaining drones continued toward the original objective. The ambush had not disappeared. It had simply changed direction. The Tor systems may have been removed from the battle, but the Ukrainian control signal was still active, and Russia was already following it toward a more valuable target. While the Ukrainian drones were fighting through the air defense corridor, another battle was developing behind them. Russian electronic warfare teams were listening for the radio signals that kept the mission connected. Their target was no longer only the aircraft moving toward Shanghar. It was the network linking those drones to the people controlling them. The airborne relay was essential to the operation. A ground antenna can communicate directly with an aircraft only while both remain within radio view. At long distances, the curve of the earth, terrain, trees, and buildings can weaken or block the signal. This becomes more serious when a strike drone flies close to the surface. Ukraine addressed that problem by placing a relay aircraft higher in the sky. It received commands from the ground team and passed them toward the strike formation. It also returned video and flight data to the operators. Without that connection, the crew would have less control over the route. Yet the relay that extended the mission also created an electronic trail. Radio transmissions cannot be seen like an aircraft, but they can still be detected. A receiver can identify activity across part of the radio spectrum and estimate the direction from which it is coming. When several listening stations collect the same signal from different locations, their bearings can be compared. The crossing points help narrow the source to a smaller area. One measurement may show only a general direction. A second can reduce the search zone. More readings collected over time can produce a grid accurate enough to guide another platform toward the suspected control position. The Ukrainian crew therefore faced a difficult trade. Short transmissions reduced the chance of detection, but the drones needed a stable link for manual control. The longer the mission continued, the more data Russian teams could collect. Every correction to direction, altitude, or speed moved the aircraft closer to the bridge, but it also kept the signal active. Russian analysts could then search the estimated area for a raised antenna, a communications vehicle, a generator, or a protected shelter holding the operators. Their position could be inferred from the control link connecting the ground station to the relay above. Once the possible location had been reduced to a workable grid, Russia reportedly sent a small fixed-wing reconnaissance drone toward the area. Its purpose was not to attack immediately. It was to confirm what the electronic warfare teams had found. From above, the aircraft could search for vehicle tracks, antenna equipment, disturbed ground, or movement near a shelter. Its camera could turn an electronic estimate into a visible target and provide live information to the force preparing the next strike. This changed the purpose of the engagement. Russia was no longer focused only on destroying drones already in the air. A trained control team represented a more valuable target because its operators carried knowledge about navigation, communications, targeting, and coordination. The search had now moved from radio detection to visual confirmation. Russia had narrowed the area of the Ukrainian control team, and the next step was no longer to listen for the signal, but to place an eye directly above the position. The Russian reconnaissance drone was circling above the suspected Ukrainian control area. Its role was not to attack directly. It was there to watch, confirm, and guide. Electronic warfare teams had already reduced the search to a limited area, but radio data alone could not reveal the exact position of every antenna, vehicle, or shelter. The reconnaissance aircraft provided the missing visual layer. From above, its camera could examine roads, disturbed ground, vehicle tracks, and movement near possible command positions. It could also identify the direction in which the Ukrainian team might try to escape. A rough coordinate may send a weapon toward an area, but live video can turn that estimate into a precise target. The drone could pass updated images to an FPV crew, a Lancet operator, or another strike unit nearby. If the vehicle moved, the observer could follow it. If the first strike missed, the drone could help correct the next attempt. The reconnaissance aircraft had become the most urgent threat above the position. Ukraine responded by launching an FPV interceptor almost vertically toward the orbiting target. FPV drones are usually used against vehicles, infantry positions, or equipment on the ground. Here, the pilot had to chase another aircraft in open air, judge its speed, match its direction, and close the distance through a narrow camera view. The interceptor did not need a large warhead. A direct collision could damage a wing, break a control surface, or destroy the propeller. The first approach reportedly failed. The FPV passed close to the Russian drone without making contact. That miss gave the reconnaissance aircraft more time to watch the area. Ukraine launched another interceptor almost immediately. The second FPV climbed toward the same orbit and adjusted its path as the Russian aircraft turned. This time, the two drones collided. The reconnaissance aircraft lost control and fell away. Its camera could no longer provide live images, and the targeting chain lost its clearest source of correction. The loss of the reconnaissance drone did not remove the danger completely. Russian forces still had the original radio bearings and the approximate grid of the Ukrainian team. Any weapon already launched toward that location could still reach the area. However, the information was no longer being updated in real time. A moving vehicle could leave the original point. A crew could abandon the shelter. An antenna could be folded and carried away. Without the drone overhead, Russian units would have to attack a position becoming less accurate with every passing second. Ukraine had not erased the coordinates already collected. It had broken the final link between a rough electronic estimate and a precise moving target. The battlefield picture was beginning to age, and every second reduced the value of the Russian targeting data. Ukraine had blinded the platform that turned detection into an accurate strike. Yet the initial coordinate remained in Russian hands, and the operators still had to leave before the next attack reached the area. The first Ukrainian control team had reached the most dangerous stage of the operation. Russian electronic surveillance had already narrowed its position. The reconnaissance drone above the area had been destroyed, but the original coordinates remained in Russian hands. Any weapon moving toward that grid could arrive within minutes. The operators faced a difficult choice. They could continue transmitting and guide the strike drone toward Chandhar, but that required them to remain beside an active antenna at a location Russia had identified. They could shut down the link and leave, but the aircraft might lose manual control before reaching the bridge. Ukraine had prepared another option. A second control team was reportedly positioned about 50 kilometers away. It had its own relay aircraft in a separate area and was ready to connect with the incoming drone. The handoff had to occur without breaking the video feed or causing the aircraft to lose direction. The second team confirmed the drone, flight path, altitude, and communication channel. Its relay then entered the signal chain and began carrying the control link. Once the transfer became stable, the first relay moved away. The original team lowered its antenna, stopped transmitting, and began leaving the position. The drone continued because it was no longer tied to the first ground station. Control had moved to another crew in another location. The second team took control when the drone was close to the bridge. Its position had remained quiet during the earlier fighting, giving Russian forces less time to detect the news signal and prepare a response. The operators corrected the final route and directed the remaining aircraft towards separate points on the Chandhar bridge deck. The drones struck the roadway in several places. The attack did not need to destroy the entire structure. Large holes in the surface could stop heavy trucks, fuel tankers, and military vehicles from crossing safely. Traffic would then have to wait for repairs or move toward longer routes. That could slow the movement of ammunition, fuel, equipment, and personnel between Crimea and Russian forces operating farther north. The immediate result was damage to the bridge, but the deeper result was operational. Russia had found the first team and threatened the control network, yet the mission continued because the drone could change hands while still in flight. The bridge had been hit, but the larger lesson was clear. A strike could survive even after the original control team had to disappear from the battlefield. The deeper meaning of the Chandhar strike lies in the network behind it. Ukraine did not depend on one aircraft, one operator, or one control point. The mission continued because several teams, relay platforms, and attack drones could support each other when one link came under pressure. Russia also showed how modern defense is changing. Air defense systems, electronic surveillance, reconnaissance drones, and terrain were used as parts of one connected trap. Ukraine answered with deception, rapid targeting, interception, and control transfer. The bridge may be repaired, and Russia still has other routes into southern Ukraine. Even so, every damaged crossing adds delay, cost, fuel use, and pressure on the remaining network. This battle suggests that success in drone warfare will depend less on numbers alone and more on coordination, flexibility, and the speed at which each side can replace a broken link before the enemy can exploit the weakness. If you found this analysis helpful, please subscribe and join us for more reports that explain how modern conflicts are changing the world. Our goal is not to celebrate war, but to understand it. Every new weapon, every military decision, and every battlefield innovation carries consequences that reach far beyond the front lines and affect millions of lives. By learning how these conflicts unfold, we can better understand the value of peace, the cost of war, and why informed discussion matters. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next report.